Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. So today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk about actualizing the experience of divine truth in consciousness by being a faithful witness to the perfection of being. Listen as we explore the question, can you rest with confidence before you know that you are spirit? From Fitch, 4th Dimension, Class 2A. In this show, we will discuss the importance of understanding what is meant by spiritual identity in divine science as taught by Mary Baker Eddy. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and touch the living spirit of life. Swami, the title of today's show is Touch the Hem of Spiritual Consciousness. Can you tell us what it is that we mean by this title?
Yeah, this class was inspired by an exercise I did one day after seeing a video that we did on 9/1/2021 on Facebook, which was posted with this statement, and I'll read it. Spirit is the only identity that exists, and until you touch the consciousness of spirit, you have not entered into the life, which is the life of God, and it cannot flow into your experience. End of quote. And that was from Fitch, Living in the Fourth Dimension, 2A. Yeah, so I opened the transcript that I have on that series of lectures that he did, and I did a search on the word touch and got the idea to revisit the idea of touching spiritual consciousness, along with this story in the Bible where the woman who was healed by touching the hem of the robe of Jesus.
I can recite that verse right now for our listeners. There are actually two verses that I think we'd like to recite, and the first one is from Matthew 9:20-22, and then we'll read Matthew 14:35-36. So here's the first one, Matthew 9:20-22. And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole. But Jesus turned him about, and when he saw her, he said, Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole. And the woman was made whole from that hour. I will now read the second verse, Matthew 14:35-36. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out into all that country round about, and brought unto him all that were diseased, and besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. And as many as touched were made perfectly whole. And so I like that verse too, because last week's show we talked about imperfection. What are your thoughts about those two verses?
Well, again, it's the idea of becoming whole. To be perfect is to be whole, to be complete, which what we're saying is to be one, to be in spiritual identity, which is the goal of what we are trying to accomplish with Kriya Yoga, to be one, the union of the individual with the one perfect divine life.
And I just have a curiosity what you think about the first verse about the woman who touched the hem of the robe. And to me it sounded like, well, even Jesus said the same thing, that because of her faith, she would be made perfectly whole. Do you think faith really is one of the main components that we need to be able to touch the hem of the robe?
To understand the term faith for me, I have to make a clear distinction between belief and faith. To believe there is a divine creation, the divine idea, the perfection of being, right here and right now, that's phase one. See, the faith part is when your belief in this divine truth then begins to externalize in your experience. That's the healing that happens. And so it's not really the belief or the faith. It's this idea of touching the robe, the hem of the robe. It's where you all of a sudden perceive the divine idea, the perfection of being in your consciousness, which then externalizes. This is part of what we really want to talk about in this show today.
Well, I see we have a soundbite from Fitch. Maybe now would be a good time to play it.
Yeah, this is from Fitch, Fourth Dimension, Class 2A. And if you want the whole audio file, you can get this at mysticalprinciples.com, and I'll play it.
I am not born of Joseph. I am not born of Mary. I am born of Spirit. And Spirit, being my Father and your Father, you are born of Spirit. This is contrary to everything that you know as a person. And yet the way shower, the Son of the living God, the Son of Spirit, is saying that I have overcome death because I am the Son of Spirit. And if you believe on me, if you believe that Spirit is your Father as I believe, then you too shall overcome death, and greater works shall ye do. Therefore, if you are born of Spirit, you are Spirit. For like begets like, and the Father Spirit begets the Son Spirit. And Jesus has overcome the grand illusion that man on earth in the flesh is the divine image and likeness of God. Genesis said that man was created in the divine image and likeness of the Father. And Jesus revealed that the Father is Spirit. And the divine image and likeness is Spirit. He discovered the identity of God and of man. And so he, being Spirit, was the Son of the living Spirit. Now, when you come to that understanding, that until you are the Son of the living Spirit, you are mortal flesh who cannot overcome death, who cannot overcome those fallibilities that lead to death, and cannot do the greater works that come after the overcoming of death, then you are beginning to unveil the nature of God in yourself. Spirit is God. And the Son of God is the Spirit of God flowing through the universe as God itself, individualizing as your being. And although you have read it, although you have heard it, although you have said it, unless you have quietly, firmly rested in the Word to listen, to know, to feel, and finally to reach that momentous conclusion that you are Spirit and nothing else, you will continue to walk not in the footsteps of the way-shower, not in the truth, not in the light, not in the peace that passeth understanding, but in the ways of mortal mind, experiencing the good and the evil, the life and the death, the health and the bad health, fluctuations of human existence, until there is no human existence. Identity as Spirit is the beginning of the adventure in Spirit. And unless you come face to face with this, you will continue to seek the externals, thinking that what you are going to find is going to lead you somewhere to a place called heaven on earth. And you're going to find that every direction in which you move will lead only to a blind alley. I am Spirit is the revelation of Moses when he said, I am that I am. I am that Spirit. And Jesus, when he said, I and the Father, I and Spirit are one. And his secret, the secret which enabled him to overcome death, was just that, the awareness that I am Spirit, and then the fidelity to that knowledge. You cannot be faithful to your spiritual identity unless you have established it as your identity. Many of us who have reached certain high points of consciousness have discovered that in spite of this exalted attainment from time to time, we fall back into a human consciousness, and then we walk out into a world over which we have no dominion. And yet, this lack of dominion is only the absence of the realization that I am not mortal man. I am spirit. And when you make this turn, when you spend the time to make this turn, when you spend the time to contemplate the nature of being spirit, you will discover that the secret of the entire Bible is just those 3 words. There is no place in the Bible, there is no place in the New Testament, regardless of what you see or hear, as the action or the deed or the word or the thought of Jesus that is not saying to you, I am spirit. And these things that I do out here are done simply because I am spirit. For only spirit can do them. I of mine own self, Jesus, can do nothing. These things that are called miracles are done because spirit does them. The Son can only do what he sees the Father do, and the Father is doing the works. Spirit is doing the works. Do you see the living in grace that comes from the realization of self as spirit? Now let us recall to ourselves that spirit has no beginning and no end, that spirit is infinite, that spirit is not involved in the physical world, that spirit is not in time and in space, that spirit is infinite power, infinite presence, infinite mind, infinite self, infinite being, infinite harmony, infinite truth, infinite awe. Spirit is the only identity that exists. And until you touch the consciousness of spirit, you have not entered into the life, which is the life of God, and it cannot flow into your experience. We find then that the realization of self as spirit enabled Jesus to walk away from that self which can die, which can be diseased, which can be lacking, and then steadfastly refusing to be anything but spirit, he watched truth unfold itself. Now as you walk behind him as spirit, knowing that only spirit exists, and you are faced with matter, what are you being faced by if only spirit exists? If spirit is infinite, if you are spirit, what is this confrontation of matter before you? What was his answer? I of mine own self can do nothing. The Father within, he doeth the works. Put up thy sword. Take no thought. Abide in the Spirit, neither by might nor by power, but by my Spirit. And so as you rest in spiritual identity, the awareness of spirit as the only life on this earth gradually descends into your consciousness. Wheresoever you may look, spirit is. To the left and to the right, above and below, you are in a spiritual universe. The infinity of spirit precludes the presence of any other substance or life. You do not go out and conquer the spiritual universe. You touch your own identity as spirit and rest in the effortless action of spirit to maintain itself. There is no work in spirit. There is no effort in spirit. There is no thought in spirit. There is no overcoming. There is a resting with confidence. Can you rest with confidence before you know that you are spirit? And so, not having this realization that I am spirit, we live in the divided consciousness which must always turn to meet a new intruder, always face another problem, always seek to find a place where it can be at peace, but never finding it, because out of true identity, we are always moving toward the light, living in the shadows. Find your identity. Jesus was not Jesus, but the Son of the living God. Jesus was born of the Father, Spirit. And there is a place in our Bible where he says, that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. And that line is one of the greatest of all. Call no man your father, for spirit is your father. And that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. And we, born of the Spirit, born of the Father, are spirit. Rest in yourself for a moment. See what it feels like to be not flesh and blood, not mortal, not human, but that which he revealed we are. Spiritual being. Not spirit and, just spiritual being. The Son of the living God. I am that spirit.
We're going to talk more about this soundbite when we come back from our pause to hear a word from our sponsor. So listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Institute for Personal Development Incorporated is a Kriya Yoga ashram offering yoga classes in all 8 stages of Kriya Yoga, including classes, personal training, teacher training, residential program, online live classes, and online products for self-discovery and transformation. Discover, learn, and practice one of the oldest and purest forms of yoga, Kriya Yoga, by uniting ancient religion with modern science. Visit www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those who are just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So now let's start talking more about this soundbite from Fitch that we just listened to. What are some of the main points that you think we should discuss?
Well, I think one of the first things that really impressed me was when he says, Jesus has overcome the grand illusion that man on earth, in the flesh, is the divine image and likeness of God. I think oftentimes we hear that we are all the children of God, and what we have been saying, Mary Baker Eddy, in one of her writings, when she talks about the child of God, she doesn't mean mortals are the child of God. This is exactly what each of us must do, come out of the shadow of the false sense of life. And we do this by touching the hem of the robe, by conscious awareness of the divine omnipresence.
So, Swami, how do we know when we have touched the hem of the robe?
Yeah, the bleeding stops. Whatever it is, you have this instantaneous revelation. Life is perfect. And that's one of the things that we're always saying. How do I know that what I'm calling truth is truth? Because the message of the Christ is heal the sick, reform sinner, raise the dead. One of the things Herb told us that the outer world of sense and the inner world of spirit become one when divine truth is your only consciousness.
I would think that when you touch the hem of the robe, when you get to that touching of that divine consciousness, you would not want for anything and you would not fear anything. Would that be correct in your assumptions?
Well, yeah, because it's whole, it's complete. There's nothing that ever needs to be added to it or taken away from it. This is part of the process of educating thought up to spiritual apprehension is we have divine mind, but it only knows divine truth. And what is preventing us from seeing the divine truth is this human mental recreation of it. And one of the shows that we did on can the mind free itself from its own creation? The way that we do this is we stop thinking. We stop forming thoughts and opinions based on information coming through the material senses. because the language of spirit is silence. The activity of spirit is stillness. So in silence and in stillness, we create a hospitable environment to invite divine truth into our awareness.
So you said to be conscious of this divine omnipresence, we must know ourselves in the way we are known by the Creator, which is in spirit and truth. So again, what does that look like when that happens?
Well, to understand what it means to be one, to understand what it means to be perfect, to be whole, to be complete, there's no striving, struggling, planning, seeking, or even asking. We rest in the knowledge of this infinite spiritual truth, that life is perfect.
So I see like maybe a second point we can talk about in that Fitch soundbite. I'll read it and then let's get your thoughts on it. Until you are the Son of the living Spirit, you are mortal flesh, who cannot overcome death, who cannot overcome those fallibilities that lead to death, and cannot do the greater works that come after the overcoming of death. Can you give us your thoughts about that soundbite, and why do we think that's important to what we're talking about today?
Until we accept ourselves to be the spirit of life, we are in duality. And in this divided consciousness, we do not receive the things of the Father. There is no sense asking God to give it, because God can't give us anything, since God isn't withholding anything. The Bible tells us we must ask in my name, in spiritual identity, in order for the spirit of truth to flow into our individual experience. And that's what's meant by to worship in spirit and in truth.
And Swami, can you just explain what my name means again? I know we've talked about this before. When we pray, we're not asking God or Jesus for things. That's not what we mean by my name. So what would that look like if you were to ask in my name?
My name means my likeness, and my likeness is spirit. And when you are in spiritual identity, you're whole, you're complete, you're one. And you start to understand that I want obscures I am. It's all a matter of what am I conscious of? What do I identify with? And as long as we are identifying with duality, we're in need. And as soon as we rise into the understanding of spiritual awareness, there is no need. Life is perfect. We rest, we watch, we let.
So another curiosity about a key point in the soundbite from Fitch. I'll read what he says. You cannot be faithful to your spiritual identity unless you have established it as your identity. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, we can't give away or we can't use what we don't have. And I think this is a common problem in metaphysics today. We think we're spiritual. We think we know the truth, but we're not in spiritual identity. We're still in the mortal mind and have not graduated to the soul. And we know this by our deeds. We're not bearing the fruits of the Spirit. It's like that story that you just read in the Bible where the woman touches the hem, but she's healed immediately. That's your confirmation that consciousness has touched the truth of being. And until we have that, this is also something we are aspiring to do. And we realize that you don't just do this academically, intellectually. Only spirit begets spirit. To worship, we must worship in spirit and in truth. This is the physics of spirituality. This is the like attracts like. Until we know ourselves in the way that we are known by the Creator. And I really like what Herb's telling us here. Until we do this, we're a physical body with an expiration date.
And you just remind me of the other thing that he says, and yet this lack of dominion is only the absence of the realization that I am not mortal man. Your thoughts?
Yeah, like he says, the outer world of sense and the inner world of spirit become one when divine truth is the only consciousness. Ignorance is not an opposing power to truth. It's the absence of truth. Darkness is not an opposing power to light. It's the absence of light. But in the light of divine truth, it reveals itself as the only truth. The divine creation is the only reality. And like he said, spirit is the only identity that exists. And until you touch the consciousness of spirit, you have not entered into the life, which is the life of God, and it cannot flow in your experiences. If spirit is all, who am I? Who are you? Only one perfect divine life.
And that kind of flows right into our next note from Herb Fitch. So as you rest in spiritual identity, the awareness of spirit as the only life on this earth gradually descends into your consciousness wheresoever you may look. Spirit is. Your thoughts about that?
Yeah, letting divine mind take over the scientific government of the body. We watch, we know, trust in the invisible, intangible omnipresence. The language of spirit is silence. The activity of spirit is stillness. As we asked in the opening, can you rest with confidence before you know that you are spirit? Man says, show, and I will trust. God says, trust, and I will show. We have to have this faith that divine creation is here. We start with belief, but then as our knowledge of this invisible, intangible perfection of being begins to influence our thought, it begins to externalize as these experiences.
So we don't want to say it's me and spirit. We have to understand that it just is spirit.
Right, that's what he said, not spirit and. As we begin to educate thought up to spiritual apprehension, we begin to grasp the nature of spirit as one. Only one perfect divine life, looking at itself, as itself, of itself, to itself.
And there's a Mary Baker Eddy quote that we have. It's one of my favorites. Can you read that for us and then we can talk about it?
Yeah, this is under the marginal heading, Spiritualized Consciousness. And I'll read it. Become conscious for a single moment that life and intelligence are purely spiritual, neither in nor of matter, and the body will then utter no complaints. End of quote. That's from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, page 14, line 12. Yeah, and this is her way of saying when you touch the hem of the robe, that the body will utter no complaints. This is the way it works. Consciousness is experience. But the main thing is to know what it looks like when you are conscious of divine truth. Because if you're not healing the sick, reforming sinners, or raising the dead, chances are you're still in that mortal sense of self.
Well, we're going to break down our show for today, so listeners be sure to visit the website, www.ipdtransform.com. On the homepage, you see the fading banner Blog Talk Radio. Click it, directs you to its catalog page. Click the products tab, and online classes directs you all the classes that Swami has available. Swami, any final thoughts about today's show?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and touch the living spirit of life. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. I'm Lisa Winton, with me, Kenny Toy, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.